There's not one, but there's two San Antonio heavy metal community alumni in Fate's Warning.
That is true.
Yes, it is true.
Ray Alder.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes. Indulge us.
How I got the Fates gig?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Well, first of all, Mark Zonder, was the longtime drummer with the Fates. And I'm not sure why exactly, but for some reason, Mark and Jim Matthias or whatever, Mark didn't want to do the tours or didn't want to do the records. I don't know what the deal was, but Jim was looking for another drummer for Fate's Warning. And at that point, I was approached, and I was even approached to record a record, the X record, or 10, as some people would say. And I actually did demos for that. But for some reason, and I came basically on a recommendation from Mike Portnoy. And so did Nick DiVirgilio, also came on recommendation from Mike. And I recorded some demos, and for whatever reason, Jim didn't choose to use me on the record, and he went back with Zonder on that. But for some reason, that was parting ways, Zonder and Jim and the Fates Warning guys. And so for some reason, I guess Jim felt like they had a tour coming up, and Jim didn't ask me to do the tour. Maybe he thought I was, mad because they didn't use my tracks on the record. I don't know what it was. And still to this day, I probably, I don't know why, but they asked Nick to do the tour. So Nick did the European tour with him. And this was 2007 or 2006 when they did the tour. Then there was a festival that was going to come up and in Europe, in Italy, called the Evolution Festival. And Nick could not do the gig. So at that point, Jim looked at the bill for that day and he saw that Sebastian was headlining. And so Jim called me and said, hey, you're going to be with Sebastian on this gig in Italy. Would you mind, playing with us also? And I was like, well, there's a problem. I said, and this was before, and Sebastian was on a whole tour at that time, going to be at that time. And Fate's Warning, we're going to do it as a fly-in to Italy. But I had broken my wrist in my rehearsal room in LA when I was living in LA. I had just came off a tour or something, and I threw all my hardware on the ground. And anybody who knows me, I don't wear shoes. Any, chance I get, I will not wear shoes. I hate shoes, whatever. I play barefoot and all that. I still had my shoes on, and I'm in my rehearsal room on the third floor in Hollywood, and my hardware is all laying around the floor. And I was walking, and my shoelace got caught around one of my cymbal stands while it was laying on the floor around, one of the legs or something. And I fell, and I broke my wrist. And so I didn't know I broke it at that time. So the story is going around weird places. This is not in a timeline.
But
okay. Anyway,
so I call that Talk Louder podcast style.
All right. So I'm laying there on the ground. I'm going, shit. So I'm laying on the ground, and I'm like, so I finished setting up my drums, and it's kind of hurting me, And so I'm setting up my drums, and I get them set up, and I try and hold a drumstick, and I can't hold the drumstick. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll just practice double bass today. So I'm doing this, practicing double bass for about an hour. And I'm like, this sucks. So I'm like, forget it. So I lock up my room, and I go to pick up my backpack, and I can't even pick up my backpack and I'm like, ooh, this is bad, because this is an hour later. So I go to there in Glendale, I go to the med clinic, whatever. And that's when they said, yeah, you have a fracture. You broke your wrist. And I was like, And at that point they said fracture. And I'm like, well, that's not so bad. It can't be that bad. And then they were like, come back next week for your cast, or in a few days. And I'm like, cast? How long do I have a cast on? And they're like, 6 weeks. And I'm like, I got to go on tour and like 4 weeks or whatever it is. I said, I have a tour. And they said, no, you got to keep this on 6 weeks. And that's when I broke the news to everybody that, hey, I can't go on this long Sebastian tour. So I was at home during the middle of the summer while Sebastian's on this 8-week tour of Europe. And I was so depressed about it, about not being able to do the tour. So when Jim calls me and he says, I'll back up now to the Fates Warning thing. Jim says, can you do this show with us? Evolution Festival in Italy. It was later it was kind of at the end of the Sebastian tour. And he said, Sebastian's headlining. And I said, well, there's a problem. I said, I'm not on tour with Sebastian because I broke my wrist. And I said, he's got a fill-in drummer for this tour and of Europe and whatever. And I said, and I said, but my cast will be off, 3 weeks before the tour, and I said, do you want me to do the gig? And they were like, yeah, if you can do the gig, then, that's cool. And then they said 50 minutes worth of music. So Jim sent me 50 minutes worth of, the set list or whatever. So I wrote out all the songs, charted them all out and stuff. And I worked with a guy that does this therapy or whatever around my cast and stuff like that. And it's funny because I was playing local gigs in LA at that time, and I was playing gigs with one hand. I mean, I was literally going to my gigs and playing my local gigs.
We're sitting here laughing, but there's a pro drummer who's been playing gigs with one hand forever.
Yeah.
Now I'm sorry, finish your story.
Okay. So I broke my, so I did this therapy sort of stuff, and I was playing all these local gigs with one hand and stuff. But when the cast came off, I had about, I don't remember exactly, but let's say 3 weeks to work on the Fates Warning stuff. And so I did, and I started going through it lightly or whatever. And within a couple of weeks, I felt my strength was back and everything in my left hand or whatever. And I ended up doing that show with Fates. I flew over. We did one rehearsal in Italy at a rehearsal studio. And I did the show the next day. And we're all sitting around after our 50-minute set. And then Nevermore played. And then Sebastian headlined with a different drummer. And so we're sitting around having beers and kicking back by the fire there at the Evolution Festival. And Jim goes, hey, if we book a tour, you want to do a tour with us? And I'm like, hell yeah, I'll do a tour with you guys. And it's sort of just, that's kind of how, the Fates Warning thing. And Jim started booking stuff. And then after that whole thing with Sebastian and the tour ended, then Sebastian called me back. And then, so now I was in both bands kind of trying to, try to do both. And that's kind of how it.
Do you have someone who sort of like handles your calendar, or do you do all that?
Oh yeah, I do that.
Holy shit.
No, it's not that big of a deal.
I
don't even write a lot of stuff down. I just kind of have it in my head.
Wow, that's amazing. So I was in my brain, this is welcome to my brain for a second. I would have like a yellow marker for the Sebastian gig, a red marker for the Halford gig, a blue marker, and it would just be a way that I'd be able to like separate everything. I have got a heavy metal hat. I got a country hat. I got a Sebastian hat, whatever that is. I got it right. So
I do have different color folders for every band.
I knew it.
It's color coordinated.
I knew it. Yeah. I don't have colored folders, but I have the name of the project written on a folder. I have a small library of,
Fates Warning folder is red. The Sebastian is blue.
You getting this, Dave?
This is inside information.
The Halford, because Halford stuff goes, I've got like different folders for different.
era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or sort of that kind of thing.